Hi, I am Allie Camaletti, and you are listening to Snack Leadership. I will be talking about everything leadership, broken down into bite-sized pieces. You will hear what different leadership skills look like in organizations and how they can rise teams up or take them down. I help leaders build resilience and improve performance by bringing awareness to opportunity behaviors in my business. Spark your mindset. I provide leadership and sales coaching, as well as team building and guest speaking. My hope is for you to feel inspiration and to create a spark in your mindset. Today we are talking about self-care. Self-care is the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health. Nina Simmons is co-founder and chief relationship officer at Bioneers and leads its Every Woman's Leadership program. Throughout her career spanning the nonprofit, social entrepreneurship, corporate, and philanthropic sectors, Nina has worked with nearly 1,000 diverse women leaders across disciplines, race, class, age, and orientation to create conditions for mutual learning, trust, and leadership development. She co-edited Moonrise, The Power of Women Leading from the Heart, and authored Nature, Culture, and the Sacred, A Woman Listens for Leadership, which was released as a second edition in June 2022 with an accompanying discussion guide, and embodied practices. There are times where I have different leaders come into my world that are a reminder there are no coincidences in life. I believe our life journey is human connection and growth. Nina is hands down one of those leaders. I am so excited to introduce her to you. Get ready to hear what self-care is all about. Hi, Nina. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am really excited about this topic of self-care.
I'm really happy to be with you, Allie, and so am I.
So we are kicking off 2023 with a wonderful topic and so important for leaders to really have in their life, as you and I both know. I want to start off with a new question. And the question is, what is something that you have recently learned about yourself?
Well, this is a humbling lesson that I have just been receiving in the last few days, as a matter of fact. And but it's also been a recurring lesson through the pandemic, which is that I feel like my body and mother life are holding me accountable for really walking my talk. And what I mean by that, Allie, especially in relationship to self-care, is that I've spent, 25 years working with women about leadership and all kinds of leaders, really. And self-care has always been such an important topic. And uh, a lot of what my work is based upon is the notion that in our leadership, we tend to carry forward habits and implicit biases that we may not have consciously ever taken on, but that are in us nonetheless. And so, my recent humbling learning, again from Mother Life, is I need more time to rest. And because of the biases that I believe our cultures have really impressed upon us, we tend as leaders to be in constant productivity. And one of my favorite learnings along the way has been that the feminine in us, regardless of what gendered body we might be in, thrives in spaciousness, and that our ways of working in this culture do not give enough room for spaciousness and rest. And so, after all these years, while I'm enjoying, appreciating that I've learned a thing or two, I am very humbled to realize that my pattern of overscheduling myself and overproducing is not one that I have been able to fully shed yet. And so, it's one of my credos that I expect to be cultivating my leadership until the day I die. And I hope to be. And that's an example.
I love that you are sharing this so much. This is a conversation I just had yesterday with a leader, and she was forced to take time off because of the amount of PTO that she had that she needed to do by the end of the year. And she said, my manager kept saying that I deserve this. And I said, what if you reshifted how you think? Our society puts so much pressure on us to work so much. But when we are able to take that downtime, it's so much better because I am an example of how your body will react when you put too much pressure on yourself. And so I am a big advocate of self care. And some people are like, geez, Allie, you're taking a lot of vacation. I say, yeah, you know what? I lean into self care. It is part of my lifestyle. And so thank you for sharing that.
Well, and I think, Allie, as you've said, that if we can practice self care in an ongoing way, it makes us better leaders. I mean, investing in ourselves as instruments of leadership is what makes us better.
So true.
We've kind of been taught not to, but it's really important.
And so, when did you first really start embodying this piece of self care and seeing the importance of it?
Well, I think it's been a long process for me and really a part of my inquiry about how we're all redefining and reinventing leadership in this period of time. Because I think what happened for me, Ali, was that I I realized early on that I was being recognized for my leadership and I didn't like it. I thought I thought it was a label that I hadn't necessarily earned. I thought it put a target on my back, and it conjured all kinds of visions for me um, that I didn't want to become. And so I began this really deep inquiry into leadership and started exploring who were the leaders that I most aspired to be like. And I realized that they all were reinventing leadership from the inside out. And that if we're listening inwardly, our bodies tell us when we need to take a break. And even if it's a 10 or 15-minute sit for meditation or a brief nap or just closing our eyes, we all need it and it regenerates us. And so I began to focus on how can we make leadership regenerative so that we can break the pattern of burnout that's so prevalent in our world.
Yes, yes. And so, do you have an example of when you've really observed a leader embracing this?
Oh, sure. Well, um, we have a chair of our board of the nonprofit that I have been midwifing since for 34 years called Bioneers. And the chair of our board is a Native woman from Canada who is a co founder of an extraordinary climate justice group called Indigenous Climate Action. And when she took a 3-month sabbatical, and my husband and I looked at each other and realized we had never ever done that. And she came back so happy and whole and regenerated and rejuvenated. And so we decided to follow her lead. So she was really the embodied example of wow, leaders need these breaks. Academia may have had a good idea when they designed sabbaticals in the first place.
Yes. I am such an advocate of that, and I recently shared that with somebody when they were looking at making a career shift, and I said, each time I've made a big career move, and randomly enough, it's been before both of the businesses I've had, I've taken 6 months, and I travel, and I look deep within. Sometimes it's developing a business plan, but it's getting back to who I am in my heart, what I'm meant to put out there into this world. And I don't believe we can ever get there unless we get quiet because there's so much noise. And I will say, some people, when I've said this, they gasp. The idea of, are you kidding me? 6 months? 6 months is such a small amount of time in our lives. Yes, 6 months. But that's for me. Other people might be able to do it in 2 or 3. It just depends. Some people might need a year.
That is so wise of you, Allie. I love that. And, when you face a big transition like that, it makes sense to really, really go inside and ponder deeply. I find for me, one of my internal compass points is that I ask myself, what is it that my soul brought me here to bring to this life? And I really want to live into that as much as I possibly can every day of my life.
Yeah. So, have you experienced a leader that really struggled with this idea of self care and what that looked like and how that affected maybe the organization or the people around them?
Well, sure, many. Um,
Right.
you know, in the nonprofit sector, it's really commonplace for leaders to experience burnout. And I must say also that as I've learned more and more about racial equity, what I've come to understand is that people of color who live with higher incidence of trauma um, really need to exercise self-care in meticulous and really mindful ways, because um, it's really easy for us who don't experience those micro traumas every day to forget that it takes a bite out of your hide. And in the workplace, I know it's happening all the time, as we're struggling to transform into the culture we need for this next era that's upon us.
And being that you're bringing up different types of equity, gender, I work with a lot of women, and I feel that women really struggle with self care a lot. And I think it's because they juggle so much more too, right? They're responsible still for the household, usually, not always, as well as now being a full time income producer. And it's a lot to handle as a female.
Well, that's so true, Ali. And I also have found that women struggle with this, not just myself. And I think it's not only because of the factors that you've named, but also, it may be some combination of biology and culture. But as women, we orient towards caring for those around us. And I catch myself often in noticing and caring for the needs of people around me before myself. And I remember early on in my career praying and wishing that I could reconcile the schism that I felt between self and service, because so much of my acknowledgement and my achievement in the world had to do with service to the world. And that self-care piece, We've often been culturally trained to imagine it as selfish. And in fact, it's not selfish if we value what we bring to the world, because that's how we bring our best to the world.
Yeah. And the health piece of it. What can affect us when we do not take that downtime? And I kind of joke, but I really don't, that it can be tumor producing. Having a tumor when I was in my early 30s. And that was my first stint of, no, you're going to have to do things a little different. You and it was somebody I went to a naturopath, and she said, this tumor's produced because you always take care of everybody else. And at the time, I was open to looking at all types of medicine because they were telling me that this tumor was bigger than they had ever seen and they weren't familiar with it and they wanted to leave it in my body for a while. And so I know when this naturopath told me that, and I said, that's when I made the decision. I was like, I am not going to be able to not caretake because I just found out that my grandfather's passing and I'm about to caretake for my grandmother and I am the only one to do it. And so that was my decision of I got to get this thing taken out. So we have to be really careful about our body's health when we don't focus on self-care, and you spoke to it, especially on top of it when you've had a good amount of trauma.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we need to, I'm speaking to myself here to say, I need to notice my own level of fatigue before it gets to exhaustion so that I can take rests. Our bodies need more rest, especially now. I mean, we're in this turbulent time of accelerated change in all of our lives and in the natural world. And if we don't pay exquisite attention, you know, it's also a more toxic world than we have lived in previously as a species on Earth. So there's a lot of good reason to be really conscious about our self care.
Yeah. So talk to me about some of your leadership mentors.
Well, I mean, there are two that come to mind, and they're both writers and activists. They're both kind of hyphenates, as we jokingly say around our house. Um, One is Alice Walker, whose writing just wrapped around my heart when I first encountered it. And I love how unfettered she is, how free she is in exploring the invisible worlds, the visible worlds, the emotional worlds, the relational worlds, all of it. And also, I love how she embraces activism as well as art in her writing, because she writes poetry, she writes prose. So, and that's true of my other favorite mentor as well, who is Terry Tempest Williams. And I'll never forget the first time I read one of her books. It was the book that she got kind of famous for, which was called Refuge. And I remember walking onto an airplane, and a woman saw me carrying the book in my hand, and she said, "Oh, are you reading that? You're so lucky." And I sat down in my airplane seat and I just dove in. And I remember just being blown away by the ways that she could weave between the natural world and her personal world and her mother's illness and her spirituality. And, she wasn't about to get pigeonholed in any way. And the full expression of her wandering mind and her devotional heart just made me fall in love with her. And so she's been a mentor to me ever since. And one of my favorite things that she ever taught me, Ellie, was that when she encounters two things that seem to be in contradiction, she invites them to dance with each other. And she waits until she can find how they dance rather than going for the polarity. And it's a great great leadership lesson, I think.
It is so true. I call it getting curious, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, all right. I got to go get that book. How about a quote that you feel really embodies this conversation of the importance of self care?
Well, I'm going to read you a quote from my very favorite of Terry Tempest Williams's books. And the book is called When Women Were Birds. She says, "Not a year of my life has missed a baptism by ocean, not one. Why this relationship to mother and water? Breaking waters. We are born from what is fluid, not fixed. Water is essential. A mother is essential. The ocean as mother is mesmerizing in her power, a creative force that can both comfort and destroy."
Hmm, that is beautiful. Oh, thank you. I could talk to you all day. I have so many questions, but we're going to wrap it up with the theme of what's your favorite snack?
Well, I couldn't decide between two. This is very much like me. So, um, for salty, what I love is corn chips that are lime and jalapeno flavored. And
Ooh,
for sweet, I especially love tart. So I love dried golden berries.
wow. That is awesome. Oh, Nina, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners?
Well, I want to offer a gift. And it's so delightful to be with you, Allie. Thank you so much. So the gift is this. If you go to the following URL, which is housed at the organization that is my child, basically, um, then you will find a link to be able to download a free copy of the introduction to my latest book. So the URL is www.bioneers.org/NCS book. NCS book. And you'll find all kinds of goodies there. So I hope you go check it out. And what a treat, Allie. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for that gift, and I'll make sure it's in the show notes.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to Snack Leadership. I hope you felt inspiration, motivation, and felt your mindset spark. Snack Leadership is recorded and produced by myself, Ali Camilletti, and music by Shireen Amini.